So good morning and welcome to this Khaos Control webinar. In this session we're going to explore the different ways in which you can dropship goods directly from your suppliers to your customers. Dropshipping, also known as direct delivery, comes in many forms and flavors, from trialing new lines to outsourcing the fulfillment of bulky or high volume products. We'll go through and see how Khaos Control can help you in all of these situations and a few more. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping points to note. Firstly, you've got a navigation/options bar from GoToWebinar. It's probably on the right-hand side of your screen. This allows you to kind of interact with myself, Steve, who's here to kind of make sure I don't go way off topic, and also to let you flag up if you've got any questions. So that nav bar, you've got a red button with a white arrow that kind of goes left and right depending on whether that control panel, that nav bar, is displayed. Just click on it to show and hide the nav bar. On that bar you've got the ability to put your hand up if you've got a problem. So if you do that, it will flash up on our little dashboard, and if I haven't noticed, Steve will give me a hefty nudge in the ribs, and we'll help out as much as we can. You've also got the ability to drop into chat and kind of question areas from that control panel as well. So if you've got any questions on the way through, please type them into the question box and we'll try to get to everything on the way through, either as we go or we'll do a Q&A session at the end, depending on how that pans out. Alternatively, if there's anything you think of immediately after we finish, it's always the way, isn't it? Please either drop us a line on training@khaoscontrol.com or tweet us at KhaosERP. And myself, Steve, Lindy, one of the team, will happily come back to you with more detail. There's no need to take notes, although obviously if that's how you learn, please do feel free. We'll be uploading a copy of this webinar that will be emailed out to all of you after the event, and that will come through tomorrow. We'll be including a copy of our notes that we're using, so you can have a copy forever of my witty bon mot and other elements, and we'll also be publishing stuff on the website and our YouTube channel as well. So in terms of sharing things with colleagues and everything else, it'll all be nice and easy for you to do. You don't need to worry too much about remembering everything straight away. So what are we going to cover during this session? So we're talking about dropshipping, and firstly we're going to look at how stock items are set up as dropship items and how Khaos Control system value settings affect the way dropship orders are handled. We'll also take a look at how invoice rules can be set up to modify the way dropship orders are processed in the Invoice Manager. We'll then look at some examples of how Khaos Control deals with some actual sales orders involving dropship items. And just as an outline, those scenarios are going to include an order containing dropship items only, both automatically creating our backorder purchase order and manually doing it. Secondly, we're going to look at an order containing both dropship and non-dropship items. Thirdly, we're going to look at an order containing dropship items that come from different suppliers, and we're going to include the auto book-in functionality with that. Fourthly, we're going to look at dropshipping out-of-stock items. Fifthly, we're going to look at stopping the automatic creation of purchase orders for account customers who've gone outside their payment terms. And then finally, we're going to look at how you can report on your outstanding dropship orders. If you've got any examples you'd like to share during the webinar, then again, as I mentioned a moment ago, please use the question facility or the chat facility, or email us via training@khaoscontrol.com. If there's anything we don't get to during the webinar, we will come back to you afterwards. So, without further ado, let's fire up the old jalopy that is Khaos Control and have a look at some fun stuff. So what is dropship? Dropship is the delivery of goods directly from the supplier or other third party to your customer, also known as direct delivery or back-to-back, and a range of other terms. To identify an item as being dropship, we need to make sure that the appropriate stock options are defined. So I'm going to load up a stock code called Giant Garden Jenga. Ben, at Big Game Hunters, may be hunting me down when he sees a copy of this if he's not already logged on. So for this product, our stock options, we've got the dropship item option ticked against the product. As well as making sure we flag the item as dropship, we've also got the item flagged as stock controlled. So a stock controlled dropship item won't have any stock assigned to it when you place a sales order for it. It'll go straight on a back order, even if you've got stock available in your system, and everything runs through the system from there. There are a couple of differences with regards to how you handle your dropship items. They can be stock controlled, which is the default we've used for our presentation today, or they can be non-stock controlled. So with a stock controlled dropship item like the one we're looking at here, the sales order goes into awaiting stock, and the invoice is always set to a value of 0 in terms of the items because nothing's assigned to the order. And if we have a look at the sales and purchase orders for this item, we can see that in action. So I'll just load up that order and go to the Invoice Manager, and you can see that the only value against the order is for the delivery of the sales order, £3.50. The actual value of the order itself, so it's £50 gross, doesn't feed through because nothing's fulfilled to the sales order. So until your stock items are booked in, even though they're going to be virtual, the goods are being dispatched, the sales order is then processed. Your fulfillment percentage and value on here is set to be 0. So once the supplier has confirmed that everything's good, you're going to book everything in, mark it up as dispatched in Khaos Control, and then the invoice will be produced correctly. For a non-stock controlled item, the sales order won't go into waiting stock. It'll assume that you're going to fulfill it as 100%. The order will drop straight to staging in your invoice process. The appropriate price will be listed, and you'll crack on accordingly. So as well as those two options against the stock code, which is nice and easy to set up, there are some system value options to look at. So system values lives up on the system operations menu. We click onto that first option, and then we want to drill into sales and back orders. So in here there are a number of different options at our control. We're going to have a play with pretty much all of these during today's session, so don't worry about memorizing this dialogue right now. However, I want to cover what those are in general, so you've got some background. The first thing we can do in here is decide whether to automatically book in purchase orders created by the system as the result of the sale of a dropship item, or for that matter, any out of stock item. So we can either turn that option off, so we set to none, or we can set to auto book in backorder dropship direct POs for back orders and dropships, or for only dropship POs. So we'll leave that set to none for now, so that the system works as we expect for our initial examples. The dropship direct option underneath this drop down, ticking this will use the customer's address as a delivery address for any back-ordered purchase orders that we raise from a sales order, and we're going to go through how this works later on. Ticking the dropship only when out of stock option will mean that if you have stock of a dropship item, for example as a result of customer return, then it will be supplied from your stock rather than dropshipped. You'll still have the option of dropship on an order-by-order basis if you wish, but it does mean that if you've got any leftover stock for any reason, you can fulfill it yourself rather than just holding on to it forever. The options at the bottom here for the Auto BOPO section, again, we're going to play with as we go through today's session, but just to cover very briefly, the Auto Create BOPO tick box automatically creates a purchase order for dropship or back order items, and will automatically prompt for delivery as well, depending on which of these options we select. Don't forget, we can use these in conjunction with the option we saw earlier with regards to automatically booking our purchase order in as well, to make everything as automated and seamless as possible. For all of the Auto Create BOPO options to work, we need to have only one preferred supplier configured against our products, and the order needs to be fully paid unless we have account customers exempted, as we're going to talk about in a minute. The system can be set to ignore the payment restriction for prepaid customers, but that's a hidden system values option that you'd need to have a chat with the support team about in order to enable. Just either drop us a line during the webinar afterwards at training@khaoscontrol.com, or drop the support team a line, support@khaoscontrol.com, and they'll be able to sort that out for you. The final three options in this dialogue handle what we're going to do with our account customers and then splitting. So the allow auto PO creation when sales order is on account does exactly what it says in the tin. So by default, only fully prepaid orders are going to be allowed to be drop shipped. If we deal with a lot of trade customers as well, and we don't want to stop them benefiting from the dropship service we offer, we need to tick that on, and it'll allow account customers to be drop shipped. If you're going to use that, it's often wise to use the stop auto PO creation option as well. So what that does is it stops an account customer from having a dropship order processed if they're outside their payment terms. So if you've configured your payment terms up in Khaos Control for account customers and the order would by default go into terms hold, Khaos Control will stop the auto PO creation. So you're not sending stuff off for your supplier to fulfill that the customer's perhaps not going to pay for. The final split option auto creates dropship and backorder purchase orders, so the dropship POs will have the direct delivery address, And any back order POs from the same sales order will be non-direct delivery, so they'll come into your site, into your warehouse. This can be really useful if you've got a sales order with a mix of dropship and non-dropship stock items that are out of stock and you're going to have to raise back order purchase orders for. Cool. So there are 3 other things to consider when setting up Khaos Control with regards to dropships. The first of these is checking your supplier data. So make sure you've got valid email addresses recorded against your suppliers. Make sure your document email addresses are set properly as well. So if you've got a purchase order document address set up for your supplier, make sure that the email address there is valid. Secondly, make sure you've got the right email template set up both for your purchases and for your sales, and we're going to have a look at that later on. And then thirdly, as we've talked about already, you want to make sure that your dropship stock items have got a preferred supplier set against them and that it's the only preferred supplier. So before I pile into the rest of it, is there anything we've covered during the setup stuff that anyone would like to flag in terms of questions? I can't see anything waiting in a minute, but if I give people a minute, 30 seconds or so, just to smash things into the keyboard if you like. Cool. Good to see that we're keeping everybody on track and we haven't lost you yet. So let's have a look at some examples using the data that we've put together over the past week or so. So I'm going to close all the screens down in Khaos Control and let's go back to the starting point. The first thing I'm going to look at is a really basic example to do with creating an order for an item marked as being dropship that we don't have in stock. And we're not even going to automatically create the BOPO. So this just gives you a nice basic example of how we start off. So I'm going to create a sales order for a specific customer. You'll notice I'm being quite lazy today. Steve's thoughtfully written down all my company codes and so on and so forth, so I can just use the command window to start creating a sales order for Jane Griffin. And then we're going to use that garden Jenga item we looked at earlier, which you're going to get thoroughly bored of by the time we finish this, which I apologise. So we've created a new sales order for Jane. We've put the giant garden Jenga item onto the order, and you can see we get that delightful orange highlight. So we can see from the colour legend that marks it out as a dropship item. When we save the sales order, this should drop into awaiting stock. Okay, so if we go to the back order stock assignment screen, quick way of doing that from the product here is to right click into the context menu, stock assignments, go to, and then back order assignments, either for stock item or sales order. We'll look at stock item in this instance. And this will take us straight into Invoice Manager and show us the back order stock assignment for this item. There's a couple of things to highlight here that are handy. Firstly, you can see the lines are highlighted in yellow. Again, look at the colour legend. This will show us that those are postponed. So a line with assignment postponed against it is telling Khaos Control, even if stock gets booked in, or even if items are in stock and the order's edited and resaved, please don't assign anything to this order line. The assignment's been postponed. Until that's unpostponed or it's dealt with via the dropship, nothing's going to happen to it. So that's something to be aware of. The second thing to highlight is just this availability field that comes back on the back order stock assignment screen. So in the grid, we've got that availability information about the product. That static data that feeds through from the stock items detailed properties screen. So you can see it's coming through from there, where you've got information about a product that's going to be handy to share internally, generally about the purchasing process, but whatever works for you guys as a process, it's a really handy way to share that within the company. So we're going to go back to the sales order, and we're going to manually generate the back order purchase order. So the item's stock in awaiting stock at the minute because we haven't got the stock in, so we're going to green select the line, and we've got our POBO button at the top. That prompts the company lookup so we can select the supplier we want to use. In this case it's going to be DABS. It asks us whether we're going to direct deliver and we say yes. It asks us whether we want to create the delivery note and book the stock in automatically. In this situation we're going to say yes because then we can see how everything's run through. So there we go. We jump into the purchase order. We can see that the delivery address is populated with Jane's information. So the goods are going to be delivered direct to that person. If we printed the purchase order out, everything's here as well. So that can be covered for the supplier, and they know where they're going. We can also see that the goods have already been delivered. So if we went back to Jane's order, and we can do that using the context menu on the purchase order to go back to the associated sales order, we can see the order's now been released, and that's available for us to push through the invoice process as works best for us in terms of communication with the customer and everything else. So that's our first scenario. Nice and straightforward. I've not got any questions waiting at the minute, so I'm going to crack on. Obviously, if you do have any questions on the way through, please do say. Let's try and mix this up a little bit and make stuff slightly more intuitive and automated. So I'm going to close all the screens we've got open for the time being, and we're going to look at an order with a dropship item where the auto creation for the BOPO stuff works automatically. So system operations and system values, into sales and back orders, and we want to set the auto create BOPO dropship item to on. So that's set. There's no need to restart Khaos Control in this instance, according to my good friend Steve, and we can give him a nudge if that doesn't prove to be the case, and we'll get a new sales order created. We're going to go with Jane again, and we're going to go with the same product, so we can see an example. It would help if my chubby digits actually let me type properly. Straight into the stock lookup, we'll add the garden Jenga, and we'll hit save. I should warn you, I've done this at least 3 times during the last week and it's never worked. But this time, fantastic, I haven't managed to mess anything up. Hurrah! So the order's gone into a waiting stock and is waiting for us to come back. Yeah, and should have created the purchase order, as Steve just whispered in my ear. Okay. So in terms of the purchase order that should have been created automatically, that would release the order straight away, as we saw previously with Jane's, and we'd push through the purchase order to book it in, and away we'd go. Apologies for getting that wrong. I've obviously managed to untick the wrong option. So I'm going to move on swiftly, and we're going to forget all about that. So we've looked at a dropship item with the auto create enabled and worked. We've looked at a dropship item with the manual stuff going on. Second scenario we're going to look at is with a sales order with dropship and non-dropship items set against it. So we're going to have the auto creation for the POBO stuff set, and I'm just going to restart Khaos Control just to make sure that option Steve was talking about gets picked up properly. Cool. So in this example, we're going to enable the auto creation of BOPO for dropship items only and create a mixed sales order of dropship items and non-dropship items that's out of stock. We'll also enable the option that enables us to auto create purchase orders for account customers. So we need to go into system values and into the back orders option, and we need to enable the split dropship direct purchase orders option and the allow auto PO creation when sales order is on account. We're going to auto book in, and we're going to set that to 0 for now. We've got dropship direct set, and there's nothing else for us to change at that point. So clicking OK, and as my trusty friend here Steve says, we don't need to restart. So let's create a new sales order. This time it's going to be for universal export. Hopefully Jimmy Bond and his friends aren't hunting us down. And we're going to add the giant Jenga again, just for the sake of originality. But we're also going to put on a duvet. So bring that, FFDK is the code for that, I think, from memory. Cool. So you can see we get the 2 items onto the order. The giant Jenga is the direct dropship. The duvet case is out of stock, and hence the color change in terms of the pink and the orange / burnt umber. I'm going to save that. Khaos Control is going to go away and generate me a purchase order automatically, as we meant to 3 minutes ago, for the giant garden Jenga. And it's also going to put the duvet case king into my kind of back order list, so I know that's going to be a shortage. However, it hasn't raised a purchase order for that. So going to the Invoice Manager, I can see that this order is in a waiting stock, as we noticed from the stage on the order header as well. I can see the fulfillment percentage is set to 0 because our giant Jenga is stock controlled and the dropship's been raised, but isn't automatically booked in, and obviously the duvet case isn't fulfilled either. Let's go back to the order, and we're going to have a look at the directly raised purchase order. So a nice quick way of doing this is on the giant Jenga line, right click into the context menu, and we can go to the purchase order BO that's associated with the sales order line. And we can see from delivery address, as we saw before, everything's going to the correct place. It's for Frank. This is only for the giant garden Jenga. So whilst Frank's going to get this straight from DABs. The other goods are going to be fulfilled by ourselves. And if we go and create a delivery note and book this purchase order in, so we'll drop that up to the top. You need to make sure you've got deliver and BO release set as per. Hit save. Goods will be booked in. And if we go back to the Invoice Manager and refresh, we've now got a fulfillment percentage of 50% against the order line. And the non-dropship item is going on to back order as normal. Cool. There's no questions at the minute, so I'm going to forge ahead, confident now that we've actually had stuff work as I expected it to. So with that kind of option, if we'd enable the auto booking option, which we've talked about a couple of times, we can automate the process still further, so the order can potentially be released as soon as the purchase order is created. Whether you want to do that or not is going to depend a lot about how you guys want to work and the process you're following, but that option's there available for you. So we're going to look now in our third scenario at creating a sales order containing dropship items from different suppliers with the auto booking option enabled. So first of all, back to system values, into back orders, and we need to make sure that the auto booking for dropship direct purchase orders only is set in our drop down. This time I do need a restart, so if we click on OK, close out of Khaos Control, let's fire that up again. If any of you are wondering where the splash screen's gone, it's over on my other monitor, which I haven't got shared with the WebEx. So it's not Voodoo that's letting me log in as Adam, I promise. So we're going to create a new sales order. This time it's going to be for Universal Export again. And this time we're going to put a slightly different item on to start with, which is a little bit disturbing from my perspective. So we're going to go with giant drafts. You can see we've got a bit of a theme here. We don't live in Lilliput, fortunately. So along with that, just to make sure everyone's still on the same page and we're all reassured, we're going to put our trusty giant Jenga. So these two stock items come from different suppliers. As we've seen previously, giant Jenga comes from DABs, and we'll just nip in and show you that. Cool. The giant drafts, on the other hand, comes from Kookaburra, who apparently have branched out from producing cricket bats and other willow-based paraphernalia to producing giant draft sets as well. So when we save the sales order, Khaos Control is going to generate two separate purchase orders. So if I press Control S and save that now, it'll go away, identify each of the lines as being dropship, identify each of the lines as coming from different suppliers, and because we've got a system configured to do this for us automatically, it generates those two POs for us separately. Cool. So I click on OK. I can fire up either one of those via the context menu, so I can go to the purchase order BO as we did a minute ago. And you can see giant drafts have been ordered. The delivery address is set to be Frank again, so they're going to go straight in from Kookaburra and Red Hill to Frank up at Universal Exports. And if I also look at the delivered figure, you can see the goods have automatically been booked in. So there's nothing for us to do in terms of this. I can go to the delivery note and just confirm that for my own peace of mind if I want to. There's nothing waiting, everything's been done. And if I go back to the sales order, I can see it's been released. The order can now be processed through the Invoice Manager. So if we use Control-I from the sales order screen, that'll take us to the Invoice Manager for this product. And we can push this through Khaos Control. The other option here, rather than going straight to the Invoice Manager from the sales order, if you were handling this along with everything else you normally did, if we turn the order filter off and bring everything back in the released stage, it's really easy and quick to identify dropship invoices from within the sales invoice screen. So we can click on that filter button, or press F4 if you prefer, and one of the filters on the left is dropship invoices. So if we set that to display dropship invoices, set that on and click OK, Jane's and Universal Exports are the only two that are left for us to play with in the released folder. So that's a really nice, easy way of making sure that you're only working with the dropship invoices that you're interested in. Where that also becomes invaluable, obviously, is if you are handling a mix of dropship and normal invoices and you want to make sure that your warehouse don't get confused or try to pick the wrong thing, you can go back into the filter dialog as we have here, and on the drop-down you can say display non-dropship item, non-dropship invoices only, and that will exclude the invoices from Jane and from Frank at Universal, and let the warehouse team, the fulfillment team, only work on stuff that they can play with themselves. Cool. So I'm going to get those two invoices back so I can find Frank's, and I'm just going to process that through. So green select on. There's a couple of things with the way I've got our training instance configured that are going to have to happen. I need to get the invoice through to the issue stage, so we'll just drag and drop that. Now if I click into issue, before I do anything like that, I need to make sure I print it, because I haven't generated an invoice code yet. So just F8, obviously, as I've got a single item here, will print the invoice and generate my invoice reference for me, and I can free to issue that as we go. Cool. Still no questions on the way through, which is cool. I'm glad everybody's happy with what we're covering so far. I hope it's proving useful. I'm going to forge ahead, obviously as before. If there's anything you'd like to ask about, please do say. So I'm going to clear everything down in terms of our open screens, just using that Control-L option. And now we're going to have a look at dropshipping an out-of-stock item. So you can arrange for an out-of-stock item to be dropshipped to your customer, even if the item is not normally flagged as a dropship. So any product in Khaos Control can be dropshipped direct to the customer. It gives you that flexibility to deal with unique orders, one-offs, and that kind of stuff. If you're not holding them in stock and you still want to be able to meet the customer's requirements. So we're going to create a new sales order. This time we're going to go back to Jane, because it's been at least 10 minutes since we used her and she's feeling a bit left out. And we're going to add a large linen box product to her sales order. So I'll use the grid text search for that. Got our large linen box, and we can see it's out of stock. If I save the order, we're going to dump into a waiting stock like you'd expect, and we need to decide how we're going to get the goods to Jane. In this instance, we don't want to wait for next delivery or kind of bundle it into our next order from the supplier. We want to get this sent directly because Jane's feeling quite needy, and we're going to click onto our POBO button having green selected, and we're going to set JDS as a supplier. And we're going to answer yes in the pop-up in terms of delivering direct to the customer, and we're going to answer yes with regards to creating a delivery note and booking the stock in automatically. This means that as far as the purchasing process is concerned, we've raised a PO, it's been communicated to the supplier, and they're going to deliver this for us. Everything's good. The invoice is then moved into released once the goods are booked in. We can see they've been delivered there. So if we go back to the invoice, sales order, sorry, we can see that's been released into the pen, and we can process that through as we would normally. So any product in Khaos Control can be drop shipped as and when you like it. Nice and simple, very quick, very effective. It means you can be nice and flexible for your customers. So closing everything down, we'll go to our next scenario. We're going to look at stopping automatically BOPOing when a customer is outside their terms. So we talked earlier about account customers and how we can include account customers in the BOPO functionality, make sure they don't miss out and you don't miss out on opportunities to sell to them. However, you might not want to commit to raising a purchase order with a supplier that you're going to have to pay for if a customer is already in breach of their credit terms. Fortunately, Khaos Control can help prevent this from happening. So first thing we need to do is set up our system values options to make sure this is going to work. So in system operations system values, we go to our sales and back order section. We've got our stop auto PO creation when outside payment terms option. So we're going to set that on and click on OK. Again, with the restart, it's going to prompt us, and obviously best practices if you've got the time, crack on, but as Steve said, we don't have to worry this time. And then we're going to make sure that we've got our terms enforcement rules defined. So in the training system at the minute, we're a very trusting bunch. It's not something we've done to this point, so we're going to go into the sales invoice screen. On the button bar, we've got our other actions menu at the top, and our fourth option is Edit Invoice Rules. If we click into here, the second tab allows us to define our terms enforcement. So we're only interested in the first of these, so that's holding an order when a customer is a certain percentage over their credit limit. So I tick that to enable it. I'm going to set the percentage to 5, because I'm not feeling that generous, and I'm going to click on OK. So this means that if we create an order for an account customer who's more than 5% over their credit terms, the system isn't going to automatically raise the back order purchase order that would normally be raised for a dropship item. And just to show you how that pans through, let's go and create an order for a likely suspect. So we have a customer on the trade system called the computing department. I'm going to add our ubiquitous garden Jenga, just for the sake of mixing things up, and I'm going to hit save. And this is where we get a lovely auto PO create warning. So Khaos Control flags up straight away, hold on a minute, sale order has been moved to terms hold, and as a result purchase orders haven't been raised. If I was an attentive customer services person, I would have picked up on our nice red highlight at the top before I'd press save, but obviously being a little bit blasé, as we know, I've cracked straight on. So this has just made sure that I haven't missed out on that, and it's made sure that I haven't got erased what could, for a big ticket item, be a really expensive mistake with the supplier and leave you with stock in the warehouse that you don't actually need. So the order drops in the terms hold automatically, just off the default functionality in that regard. The only thing to watch out for here is that once you get everything resolved with your customer and with the computing department, we've got a reasonable way to go until their balance is appropriate and their everything else. But once you've actually managed to achieve that and they want to start purchasing through you again, you're going to need to manually raise that purchase order. Or bin the whole sales order off and start the process again, whatever works best for you guys. So that's just something to watch out for there. Okay, there's no questions on the way through, which is all good to see, so I'm going to crack on for now. Again, if there's anything you'd like to flag up on the way through, please do pop it into the GoToWebinar control panel. So we've talked about terms enforcement and how that fits through for our account customers. The other thing we're going to have a look at is how invoice rules can be used to specify how dropship orders are handled. So for example, you could create a rule to send all of your dropship orders over a certain value or with a delivery date far in the future to manual hold or a waiting date. So let's have a look at an example of how that would work. So we're going to go back to the sales invoice screen. And where we looked at our terms enforcement stuff, we also had our invoice rules set up. So on the other actions menu on the button bar, we click into edit invoice rules, and again, you can see we're a trusting lot. We don't need to worry too much about process. Train team leave this blank until they start playing with it so they can demonstrate it to customers. So we're going to create our first invoice rule, and this is going to move all dropship orders from a certain group of customers, we've got a company class called business, into manual hold, so that they can be checked and verified by a supervisor or a senior member of the team. So new item adds a line, company class by F4, and business is our second option, so I don't worry about searching. And if I tab across, dropship, set that, means it's only going to affect dropship orders for that business class, and I want to set my action. So I'm going to move everything into manual hold. So typing straight into the lookup, I just hit M twice for mother, and it'll take us straight down to the manual hold action. Okay, so I click on OK, that's all defined. And we can see that in action. So if we go and raise a sales order for a customer who are in that company class, and we've got RAG, who fit, Reg, I do apologise, that was quite smooth of me. RA Global, who are in that company class, again we'll slap our Garden Jenga item on there for the sake of originality, hit save, and the order will drop straight into manual hold. Purchase orders are still being created because it's a dropship item and there's nothing to stop us doing that, but it does mean that the order won't get processed in the Invoice Manager until yourself or another supervisor or senior person in the business has had an opportunity to review it and decide what to do next. Cool. So next section we're going to look at here is how we keep our customers informed on the way through the dropship process. So let's imagine we've raised some dropship orders with a supplier and we want to let our customers know when the items have been dispatched. The first thing we can do that's going to help automate and make this process as easy as possible is to make sure we've got an email template created in the system. So first of all, I'm going to close what I've got down here and I'm going to go into the email screen. So Email Manager, or type email into the command prompt. And I'm going to have a look at an email template here we've got for dropship dispatches. So this is one we created earlier. It's based on our invoice trigger, and if we double click into it, we can see it's a nice, simple template that's going to allow us to send out goods to our customers on a regular basis. It needs a slight change. I'll just do that now, make sure it's actually going to work. And what this will do for us is when we're sending out a dropship invoice, and we'll look at how we're going to discriminate that earlier in a moment, when we're sending out a dropship invoice and we know it's been sent by the supplier, we can generate an email to the customer to confirm what's going on, and away we go. So I also need to make sure I've set up the item text, so that pulls through as well. So in the message, we've used the tags to create a simple message to confirm the customer, confirm to the customer their goods are being delivered. We can make this template, as you probably know already, as complex or as simple as you like. You could start including to follow items as well if you wanted to, and you had a part ship situation going on. But as a starting point, this is how we roll. The invoice needs to be set up in this instance with a trigger rule. So for our dropships, we were talking earlier about Invoice Rules. We've also looked here at Invoice Priorities. So if I look at our trigger rules, we've got a dropship confirmation email here. And for this trigger, what we've done is we've said, right, well, we've got an invoice priority of dropship, so only for dropship invoices. And when the old invoice status is released and the new invoice status is greater, different to released, Khaos Control is going to generate an email. The email it's going to pick up is the DS dispatch template we've just been looking at. It's going to attach a PDF copy of the invoice. It's going to send the email immediately. We're not going to worry about subscribers only and attaching CRM documents. So this will trigger as soon as a dropship order moves out of that released stage. So as soon as somebody in the business highlights those orders, moves them next, or moves them into issue because the supplier said that you can process them, the communication to the customer will happen instantly. Something to flag up at this point, if you went down this route and were using something like invoice priorities to kind of flag your dropship orders up individually, and you included it in your email triggers, you'd want to make sure that you set up a balancing not invoice priority rule on your other invoice email triggers, because otherwise you'd be in danger of all of your dropship customers getting two sets of emails, one for the dropship stuff that we've set up here and then one for your normals as well. So as soon as you start adding in layers of discrimination for your email triggers, you want to make sure that you've assessed your whole suite of invoice triggers and that everything's lined up properly. So in the example we're about to see, we've set the system to auto-create purchase orders for dropship items, but not to automatically book them in. We've got 3 dropship orders from the same supplier, and the supplier has just sent us a notification that the orders have been dispatched to the customer. I'm assured by Steve that everything's here for me to play with, so we're going to go and have a look and see how we get on. So let's hop into the Invoice Manager and go to the awaiting stock stage. Now, our invoice priority for dropship is that nice DS. So we can see straight away we've got 3 orders in the waiting stock that haven't yet been booked in, and we're waiting for the supplier to tell us what's going on, and we can crack on from that perspective. So we've got those orders there, and we can see they're waiting to go. If we go to the purchase order screen, we can also see that we've got 3 purchase orders outstanding. So if we think about what our supplier is going to send through when this kind of thing happens, it's that PO code that we've sent them that's likely to be what they report back to you on. So we can book each of these purchase orders in. It's going to release those orders into the invoice process, and then we'll be able to crack on. So if you bear with me, caller, we'll just nip through and get these booked in. And I'll try and be as quick as I can be. If we go back to the list and refresh that, you can see everything's been booked in. If we come back to the Sales Invoice Manager and refresh that, you can see our dropship invoices are no longer in awaiting stock. And if we go into released, we can see that they've popped through to here. So in terms of them processing these in Khaos Control, we've got a couple of options. We've got the invoice priority we can play with. As we looked at before, we can also filter the stage so that we only see our dropship orders. So if I press F4, on the dropship invoices drop down, click on display dropship invoices only, set that to go, and you can see that we've got Jane's from before, and then we've got the 3 that we've set up here. So if we green select, and I can use the Control-Shift-R on that dropship reference, if we green select all of those lines, we can now push those through the system appropriately. So we're going to batch generate the invoices, so we've got the codes, so I'll go to order stage reports, customers, invoices batch, and I'll print preview for us because of how our default's set up. So we'll close that window, and then we're going to move these through into the issue stage. Now, if you remember from our email trigger rule, as soon as the orders leave the released stage, the dispatch confirmation email is going to be triggered. If you prefer not to have the email sent automatically, we'll have a look at what you could do about that in a minute. But in terms of automatically doing this, if we drag and drop our emails through to issue, you'll see this takes slightly longer than it would if you were just doing this without any kind of email trigger on it, because Khaos Control's got to go away and make sure everything happens. We'll we'll pop back to the email screen and we'll see that those emails have been generated. So if I go to the list and the pending emails, I want to select Display Sent and refresh, and you can see we've got our 3 dropship dispatch confirmations at the top. And if I highlight one of those, I can see order for this, been dispatched by our partner, please don't hesitate to contact us, etc., etc. I can see the stamped date and time, obviously as I was feeding this through to the com log and everything else, job be a good one. Now, on top of sending emails automatically like that, if you wanted to be nuanced or more ad hoc, in the Invoice Manager itself, you've also got the option to use the context menu in here and manually select a template to send. So if you didn't want to set a trigger up, which is how we've rolled there, you could right-click, having green selected your invoices. You can go to your email option on the context menu and set email template selection. And then you could define the template you want to use. So we could use the DS dispatch template that we've talked about here. We might have a completely different template that we want to use. You just set that here, hit send immediately, force attach invoice is an option, you don't have to have it ticked, and then click OK, and Khaos Control would then send the emails at that point. So in terms of automatically communicating with your customers, you've got 2 really quick and efficient ways of managing that element of your cycle. And obviously with the trigger rules, it doesn't just have to be it's been dispatched. You could have other parts of that process as well if you wanted to, in terms of dropship orders being created and setting expectations and everything else. There are loads of ways of using email rules and templates to keep your customers informed. Steve tells me there are dozens of useful examples on the wiki, and obviously if you've ever got a question about that kind of thing, please do drop us a line at training@khaoscontrol.com or get in touch and we'll be happy to help. So we haven't got any questions waiting in the control panel, which is good. If anybody's got anything they'd like to flag up as we're going, please drop it in. We've only got a couple of elements left to talk about, and then we'll be doing a Q&A session if we need to towards the end of our webinar. So, reporting. Let's close that lot down and get a nice Khaos Control logo back up. Outstanding back orders for dropship items. So dropship reporting in Khaos Control feeds into your general sales reporting. So because it's so much part of your key overall process, everything feeds into sales summary automatically, your margins, your profits, everything there's all inclusive, and you can easily see whether or not dropshipping is working for you from that perspective. However, in terms of outstanding back orders, it's really quick and easy to look at these via your stock reordering screen. So if we go into the stock screen and load up the reordering report, which is tab 4 from memory, we've got option at the bottom of the filter set called Show Dropship Items. So normally this is in its try state, but we're going to turn it on and then hit go, and you'll see that the 2 dropship items we've got in the system at the moment that we're playing with come straight back. And you can see that the giant drafts, we've actually got some in stock, so even though we've got 3 on back order, we've got a nice decent potential figure there, nothing to worry about there. Whereas with our garden Jenga, we can see we don't carry any, we've got 3 on back order, the potential's flagging up. So it's really easy as an overview for your business to see what's going on with regards to your dropship items, whether you're carrying any stock, what you're waiting for from your suppliers, and having that as a starting point to drill into fun times with them. Cool. So the last thing I want to talk about before we kind of sum up what we've covered and have a bit of Q&A time is to do with options that you've got available to you within the system that aren't enabled by default. So the training system we've got here is a core instance of Khaos Control, same as what you guys have got. So the options I'm going to talk about are things that you could switch on. I haven't got them available to demonstrate today because we're not trying to sell you things, but I just wanted to make sure we brought them up so that you're aware of the possibilities. So there are 4 options related to kind of drop shipping that can be enabled by contacting our development team and which are going to be handy for you guys from my perspective. Firstly, dropship items can be excluded from your courier banding weight calculations. So courier banding is set in system data, and this is where you define which service to use based on the weight of an order or the value of an order, etc. So if you're using weight a lot, and you have a mix of orders where there's a mix of dropship items and non-dropship items, excluding the dropship items weight that you've got defined against the product, against the stock code, can be useful in terms of making sure that your courier selections are valid. Probably only relevant when you've got a number of different bands and they're quite tight, but can be useful. So in terms of calculating shipping costs based on weight and using services and stuff, that's something to watch out for. As mentioned at the start, if that's something you'd like switching on, just drop the development team a line, development@khaoscontrol.com, and they'll be able to sort it out for you. On the same theme, we've looked in the Invoice Manager at how you can filter out your invoices based on whether they're dropship only, non-dropship, or internal dropship invoices. So internal dropship invoices are dropships that you're an intermediary for. So rather than having them dropship direct to the customer, you've raised the BOPO, but it's coming into you, and then you're going to fulfill on. So it's very simple to highlight and to exclude and include individual invoices. However, if you've got an invoice that has a mix of dropship and non-dropship items, it's possible to switch on an option which excludes dropship items from your batch, from your combined pick tickets. So if you process a lot of orders like that, and you ever have any issues in terms of the warehouse trying to pick product that doesn't exist because it's with the supplier, you can exclude them using that option. The third thing I wanted to talk about was to do with dropship purchase ordering, to do with dropship purchase orders and documentation you produce. So by default, if you've set up, and I'd expect you have, when you raise and save a purchase order for the first time, you'll have Khaos Control set to automatically email over a document to the supplier. So there'll be a purchase order goes to the supplier raising the goods, so they can get that punched into their system, jobs are good. However, that uses the purchase order code. And the purchase order code in Khaos Control doesn't mean anything to your customer. So when the supplier turns up with that PO code and starts saying, oh yes, we're delivering order, not terribly helpful. So within basic reports, what it's possible for you to do is to define on the purchase order report a calculated sales order reference. So either instead or probably as well as your purchase order code, in your designer for the basic report, you can also specify a calculated sales order code. I'm not going to try and suggest you all go away and break your reports today. Obviously the support team would be very grateful to me if you did. However, having a play out in your test system, coming up with a way it works for you guys, you can also use things like customer PO ref and sales order associated reference as well. The beauty of these calc fields is that they're only relevant on the purchase order report when there's a one-to-one relationship between the purchase order and a sales order. So they only work in a pure dropship scenario, like the ones we've been talking about today, and they mean that your supplier has got a reference that actually means something to your customer if they're dealing with them directly. You've also got custom options should you need them, and again, you need to have a chat with our development team, but if you wanted to send pick tickets, delivery notes, invoices to your suppliers along with purchase order documentation, that's the kind of thing we've done for a number of customers on their A-levels. It's something we, if that would be useful for you, have a chat with the development team and they can walk you through how to do that. The last option I wanted to talk about in terms of things that would be maybe worth considering enabling and making your processes more efficient is to do with FTP. So everything we've looked at here is kind of email, PDF based. When you're raising those purchase orders with your supplier, there's still going to be a manual element at their end in terms of getting the purchase orders into their system. So that means time lost at their end. It means errors when they key stuff in correctly. It means that you're relying on humans in terms of deduping and everything else. So if you've got a supplier who's able to work with you electronically, Khaos Control can be configured so that you set up an FTP config against your supplier, and some of you will have come across this with things like FIFA reviews and other stuff like that as well. So FTP is a way of sharing and transferring files between different organizations, nice and secure. And we can upload an XML file or a CSV file automatically when a purchase order is created for a certain supplier, and then they pick it up as soon as they needed to. And that can be really useful both for dropship stuff and for traditional purchase ordering. It's not something that's just a flick of the wrist and away we go, because every supplier tends to work differently in terms of file formats, in terms of what's possible. But in terms of actually making efficiencies and savings and delivering the best possible customer experience, it's something that we have seen work really well in certain situations. So if you're interested in having any or all of those elements enabled in your Khaos Control instance, please get in touch. The development team are the best place to start, so development@khaoscontrol.com, but obviously drop the train team, myself a line, and we'll be happy to help. So that's everything I wanted to cover in terms of different elements of today's presentation, today's webinar. I'm just going to go and get my board up and run through our summary of what we covered. So during the webinar, we've taken you through how to set up the system. So you've got your different options against your products and your system values, your invoice rules, your invoice terms. We've shown you how those control how dropship orders are handled by Khaos Control, how they're used in practice, and how you can report on your outstanding dropship back orders. So if anybody has any questions, now's a good time to drop those into the pot. Cool, and I can see we've got a couple waiting. So Charlotte asked about whether there can be a different default note for a dropship PO to a non-dropship PO. So initial answer on that, Charlotte, at the moment is, I'm afraid, that isn't possible right now. What I will do is have a chat with the development team here and find out what would technically be possible with regards to a suggested dev on that, and I'll come back to you after the session with regards to what we can do in that regard. Thank you very much for the question, Charlotte. It's really, I can see why that would be relevant. So the next question we've got here is from Chris, and he's asked about why the orders with Jane and making sure how we filter that out when it comes to picking. So Chris, hopefully this was highlighted during the session, but just to drop back into Khaos Control on the way through, in terms of filtering stuff out during picking, it's that filter F4 option on the dropships, so that you're either working with your non-dropships, with your dropships only for the processing and the admin side of things, or for your internal dropships. As I mentioned right at the end of the presentation, if you wanted to exclude dropship items from picking because you had orders with a mix of dropship and non-dropship, you need to talk to the development team about switching that option on. It's nice, easy switch on. It's not difficult from that perspective. So please get in touch with the guys and they'll be able to help. Cool. Next question we've got is from Matt. We've got a couple from young Matthew, so thank you for those. So Matt was asking about stock not being taken from arrivals when on a BOPO. That's not something I've come across myself, Matt. Would it be possible to take that offline, if that's okay? I'll drop you a line after the presentation and we'll hook you up with the support team and try and get to the bottom of why that's occurring. From my perspective, in terms of that goods in process for the dropships, everything's been processed automatically, so that should just work. It might be I'm missing something on that myself, but I don't believe that I do. Cool. So, Matt, in terms of how it worked without using assignments, I probably need a bit more background, and I apologise for not picking up on that on the way through. If I can take that through with you afterwards as well, that'd be great. Vicky's asked a question about dropship flagging. So, if an item only has dropship flagged and we have one in stock, is it possible to set to stock controlled and dropship to sell the stock item and then remove the stock controlled flag once sold? In short, Vicky, yes, exactly. Spot on, you can do that. So, if you've got a dropship item and you've got one in stock, you can set the stock controlled, get that item sold, and then start dropshipping again. The option we talked about in system values, and I'll just nip that up just to confirm. So in system values and back orders, the dropship only went out of stock. So when that's ticked, Khaos Control will only force you to dropship an item when you haven't got it in stock. With that unticked like we have at the minute and like we did earlier, it gives you all that flexibility you're looking for with regards to that. Cool. And then we've got one more question here from Stephen. So if you've got a dropship item as well as warehouse stocked items and it's been released and send that order to HHT picking, is there a reason why the handhelds pick up the dropship items as well as those in the stock items? Well, Stephen, I'm glad you asked. There is a really good reason. It's because the handhelds don't currently discriminate between dropship items and non-dropshipped items. So we were talking about an option we can enable in terms of excluding dropship items from combined picking tickets. If you had those kind of mixed orders and you were processing those in the handhelds as well, we'd need to look at enabling a similar option for the handhelds. To this point, we've always stuck with the filter we saw in the Invoice Manager in terms of splitting out dropships and non-dropships so that we're not sending dropship invoices to the handhelds. But where you've got a mixture like you're talking about there, I can see how that would happen. So having a chat with the development team as a first port of call would be the way to handle that. Cool. So we managed to bang through all the questions. I'd just like to apologise for not picking up on those on the way through. Some of you really quite resolutely stuck to putting them there for me, and I appreciate it. I missed the flag in the control panel that told me there were questions waiting to be answered as we went. So thank you very much for your patience in that regard. I haven't got any more cues to go through right now, so I'm going to wrap things up. If you've got any further questions as a result of this, either by watching this on replay or there's something you think of just as I managed to finish the whole session and hang everybody up, please do drop us a line on training@khaoscontrol.com or tweet us on @KhaosERP. We really appreciate the questions we've been asked so far today. It's great to see that feedback and hopefully our answers have helped. So, next webinar and what we're doing going forward. Our next webinar is going to be an oldie but a goldie. So some of you came to our roadshows last year. Something I've been asked for a number of times over the last 5 or 6 weeks is to run one of these webinars where we make sure we cover off all that functionality that got released during those roadshows, the Gandalf functionality as we called it. So the next webinar in March is going to cover all of that in detail. Details on how to sign up will follow soon. Hopefully I'll see, or we kind of share the time with you then again. If you have any suggestions for future topics you'd like to see, please let us know. Again, drop training@khaoscontrol.com a line or email me myself. And that's about it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thank you.